So whenever I'm introducing myself for the first time to someone, I feel very apprehensive about the way that they're gonna, react to myself. And standing on this stage, I'm realizing that I'm doing the same thing in front of 100 people. So, well, I'm overwhelmed to say the least. Hello, I am Mayank Bhardwaj, currently the head of student council at SriVIS and a counter speech fellow with Vilac and Instagram. And I'm a psychology enthusiast, and I like calling myself a psychologist, but we'll leave that until I have a degree. And today I'm here to talk about how each and everyone sitting in this room tried their best to destigmatize mental illness, and how everyone went completely wrong. So, the subject that half of the people cannot pronounce correctly, psychology as a subject had a very weird history in India. Because the changing socio-political conditions, the cultural changes that colonialism brought in, and different circumstances made the very purpose of studying psychology very paradoxical. So on one side, there was the Western model of studying psychology, which was basically based on studying the workforce and improving it because capitalism was on a rise. And on the other hand, there was the Indian model of studying psychology, where Indian psychologists would just research to satisfy their own creative urges. But irrespective of all the debates that happened due to the lack of personnel, the restrictive boundaries of the discipline, and the weird context that it developed not only in India but the entire world, in spite of all that, psychology today is the most far-reaching it has ever been. How do I know that? Each and every university you see and school you see is offering a course in it. The people who call the discipline psycho is thankfully decreasing, and you can research about any disorder today and go on reading and go on researching. So it becomes almost naturalistic to expect that the cases of psychiatric disabilities and mental illnesses would decrease, right? As it does with any disease when research and awareness about the disease is increased. Take cardiovascular diseases for example. The rates for cardiovascular diseases decreased from 307 out of 1 lakh people in 1950 to just 134 fatalities out of 100,000. In 1996, that marks a decrease of 56%. Talk about breast cancer, and the rates decreased 40% since 1989 and continue to decrease by 1.8% each year. And talking about stroke, if you can identify a stroke and get the person in a hospital within 3 hours, the person can walk out without any complications. But what about suicide? The reason I'm talking about suicide here is because 90% of people who fall a victim to suicide or attempt suicide have a cause of underlying psychiatric disability. And the statistics do not actually fit the naturalistic expectations we're talking about. Because India today has one of the highest suicide rates in South Asia and continues to be in the top 20 countries with the highest suicide rates all around the world, with rates that increase, that are more than the fatalities due to malaria, breast cancer, and even homicide. And when I tell these to you, the naturalistic question that appears to you is, where did we go wrong? And the answer to that question is actually divided into 2 parts. The first one being normalization and romanticism by teenagers and young adults. And the second part being a wave of ignorance and never-ending label by mature adults. Let's jump into the first part of the problem, that is normalization by teenagers. We all as a teenager have a quest for our own identity because we're exposed to this new world, and so we try each and every course that our parents push us to. And after 2-3 classes we realize that mountain climbing is not something that we want to do, based on a true story. And also the amount of information that is currently available to teenagers about mental health and mental diseases, they end up making mental illness a part of their own identity. The various symptoms, the mysterious nature of the disease, and the huge amounts of negative attention that it gathers is what makes them validated, what makes these teenagers feel validated just by attaching a disorder which can be recovered to their identity of who they are as a person. And not only this attention goes so far that there are campaigns that promote such self-harming behaviors. Some example, Thinspiration movement, the black and white Tumblr aesthetic with suicidal quotes on the end. Young girls, 14-year-old girls uploading their videos on YouTube asking people how pretty they are, and the list continues to go on and on and on. These are some real-life examples. A meme that that apparently tells that depression is really funny. A girl who fell victim to the Thinspiration movement. Poetry that glamorizes heartbreaks. A quiz that puts all these psychiatrists out of job because it can tell you what OCD level you're on. Another girl who is hashtag ProAna, that stands for pro-anorexia. And another black and white Tumblr aesthetic which promotes self-harm. You know what, all of these have consequences? And the consequences are the following. That when a group of perfectly mentally healthy teenagers push themselves down to a level of the people who are actually suffering from traumas of a bomb blast, or people who cannot get out of bed for 8 straight days, or people who fall addicts to alcohol or cannabis, when they drop themselves down to a level, these people start suffering in silence. Because wherever they go, their illness is regarded as normal, or the classic, ye to sabko hota hai. Because when everyone is extraordinary, no one is actually extraordinary, right? And just like that, this destigmatization went completely wrong. And let's not forget that adults are not perfect either. So my point would be clear by a simple statistical activity. 20% of the people in the entire world suffer from a mental illness or have symptoms of the same, and so keeping these numbers in mind, each and every one of you is bound to know one such person. But the amount of adults that actually come forward are very, very few. For me personally, when I got to know that one of my family members was suffering from a disease that's called psychosis, I was told to not talk about it, to not tell other people about it. And the reason were that there was no awareness, because nobody knew what psychosis is. It's basically a disease where your imaginary part of your brain takes over the reality and you see and hear things that are not actually there. And the second reason is ignorance. Because for 2 years, I wasn't told that the person had psychosis, because it was always hid under a blanket of depression and stress. And I don't blame my family, because those were the only 2 words that came into their minds when they heard about something as mental illness. And that got me thinking that what could have been the possible reason why my family stopped me from talking about something that's so important. And that's when I realized that it's the never-ending labels of people who suffer through mental illness. For every adult who goes through a mental illness, the label of that illness is attached to their identity forever. Take any girl, for example. Let's name the girl Tanya, okay? Tanya is bipolar, and her condition has improved over the years so much that she's doing much better now, and she's going to therapy and taking medications. But when you actually look around the social circle that she lives in, you'll hear dialogues like this. Tanya had a depressive episode last year. Tanya suffers from bipolar disorder. Tanya takes pills every day so that her mind can think straight. Tanya suffers, she just keeps on going back and forth between mania and depression, mania and depression. Tanya is a victim. And all this leads to a lack of adequate social support. Adults do come forward, but the area around them that makes the illnesses seem so trivial, that enters a label into their identity, into their honor, that's just how destigmatization goes again completely haywire. And so, what's next? I'd just like to reinforce that the twofold problems that I've just talked about can be overlapping. Adults can also normalize and romanticize mental illnesses, and teenagers can also have a wave of ignorance and never-ending labels. So, what is the next step in doing the thing that we did wrong? And it is that it's your time to destigmatize mental illness correctly. I'm going to give you 4 very, very simple principles that you can use today to make people feel better who are suffering or going through something like this. These are very simple. And the first one is talk. Talk to your children why they came crying from school. Talk to your children why they have a black eye or someone punched them in the face. Listen to the girl who sits in the corner and does not have much to say or eats her lunch alone. Or listen to the boy who cries himself to sleep at night. Because each and every time you listen, the person feels validated. The person feels that there's someone in the entire world that is willing to listen to them. And that just shares the burden, does not pass it, but makes it a little bit easier to deal with. Second, acceptance over acknowledgement. So, here's what acknowledgement of mental illness looks like. My friend suffers from dissociative amnesia. You know, he forgets important details about himself, like his own phone number or his father's address, and he just gets lost in the street. You know, I just try to stay away from him because I don't feel like going through it. I know he has dissociative amnesia, but you know, I just prefer not to deal with it. Which is very similar to saying that I witnessed a car crash. I was in full capacity to help the victim, even if the smallest help I could give that victim was a glass of water, but I decided to keep walking. And here's what acceptance looks like. My friend has dissociative amnesia because he had traumas in his childhood that he's still recovering from. I help him every day because he tends to forget things that are important and dear to him. And I help him rise up that level that he's on because he is human and he deserves to be treated that way. Third, joking is a threat. Because each and every time you joke about something, be it not related to mental illness, be it related to anything, the seriousness that lies behind that issue just goes away, just vanishes like that. The more you joke about depression, the easier depression seems to deal with. The more you joke about being bipolar, the more fun it seems to be bipolar. And the more you joke about suicide, the more compelling of an option it becomes. And just like that, something that's just a laughing stock becomes a threat to another person. And last but definitely not the least, different but equal. No person who has mental disability is in any way incapable of functioning normally as a human and doing great things. Just as, for example, a fracture might hinder Sachi's performance as a mountaineer, but when she recovers from it, she will recover better than ever. Just like that, a person suffering from mental illness, given the right social support, given the right chance, and given the chance to shine, would shine brighter than ever. These 4 principles that are just listed right here seems very simple. And that is what gives them the power they have right now. Because simplicity is the only thing that eliminates the unnecessary so that the necessary may speak. And you know who the necessary are in this case? Everyone sitting in this room and everyone watching this. Because this is your time to act. It's been a high time that we've destigmatized it the wrong way. It's been a high time that there are campaigns promoting behaviors of self-harm. It's been a high time that we stop and celebrate the differences we have, not only physically, not only culturally, but also mentally. Thank you.